Hey everyone, you're listening to episode 77 of DoubleDM, our episode on making boss fights memorable in tabletop role-playing games. In this episode, we will discuss what boss fights are, what they do for the games and stories you are playing and experiencing, and especially how to create an awesome, unforgettable experience for you and your players to talk about forever and ever after. Some of you might recognize this topic from a thread we did on Twitter the other week, where we got over 100 responses from you about creating boss battles, how to make them interesting and incredibly fun. We're gonna reference that tweet a lot in this episode, shouting out some people who gave their opinions and experiences that we are using as prompts and tips ourselves in this episode. It's gonna be a lot of talk about creating incredible boss battles, not bosses itself. It's about the battles in this episode, so if you want to know more about creating villains and bosses, please go to another episode we did a while back, which is about creating memorable villains. This is about creating memorable battles. So, I hope you will enjoy this episode, and I won't keep you any longer and send you right to the intro of episode 77.
Hello and welcome to DoubleDM episode 77. With me, as usual, is my lovely co-host Emil, and I am Niels. So, Emil, how are you doing today? How was your week? Tell me about it.
That's how my week My week went weird, you could say. Right? I had an exam on Thursday, so I had to study for that a lot and then had to write that exam. And after that, I have so much stuff to fucking do because I only studied for the exam for 4 days. So I had to go shopping. I had to prepare my D&D session for tomorrow, Sunday, and yeah, I have lots of stuff to do. I have to edit the episode that goes out on this, that you people are listening to right now, is still being produced and edited today. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but yeah, I'm here now. So
awesome.
I'm fine. It's great. It's great to be here.
Great that you are here, because if not, we wouldn't be having this other thing. Weird things my mind comes up with. Let's not talk about that. Yeah, so any TTRPG, what do you have planned for your TTRPG session tomorrow?
It's gonna be, my players went out into the wildlands, tundra, Arctic tundra, basically. So they are currently in the wilderness, trying to survive, trying to find what they are looking for. They are looking for an ancient snake temple or inner sanctum or something where the soul of an ancient snake matriarch is supposed to be. One other snake matriarch they are chasing, more or less, wants the soul, and my players want to stop that because they know as long as the snake matriarch has all the 4 souls of herself and her 3 sisters, which are the other matriarchs, she would become very powerful and maybe be able to resurrect the demon lord onto the plane. And my players do not want that.
Understandable.
So they are trying to stop her. At least that's how they understand it right now. And my players want to find this temple first and somehow deal with this soul, which they still don't know how to do, but they know they have to. That's the baseline of it. There's also some kind of very, very bad monster out there that is hunting Yetis itself.
Okay.
Which I can tell here, right? It's an abominable Yeti, which is just this bigger, badder Yeti. But I also gave it lair actions because my players are gonna fight it in its lair, probably.
Okay, interesting.
And it also has no aversion to fire damage because this Yeti lives next to this fire temple, basically. Next to I just made it a stronger Yeti that my players are gonna have to find another way to deal with. There are other ways to deal with it, which I'm not gonna talk about here, because I still have to think about them. But there's gonna be other ways to deal with this Yeti in its lair. And yeah, it's gonna be fun that they're gonna have this fight, probably. And then also gonna have this boss fight, maybe. Or maybe deal with this fight before the Snake Matriarch even arrives.
Interesting.
Right? Maybe players are there beforehand. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but it's probably gonna be a combat-heavy session. It's gonna be kind of the culmination of this arc, because it can be that this arc is just over after this session, and we're gonna go back to having a new arc of our campaign. It can also be that, for example, my players have to flee, or this BBG has to flee, or whatever. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm preparing today, and that's what I'm gonna play tomorrow.
Okay, I can't wait to hear about it, how your players dealt with all of the interesting stuff that you will be planning for them today.
Yeah, I just have to prepare 2 step blocks, basically, today, or finish 2 step blocks rather, or the step block for the boss fight, which is not just the snake matriarch, because she's also a druid, so she can wild shape into a few beasts. She has a lot of spells I need to look at, and she also can summon some ghost minions.
Okay, yeah.
She can do a lot of stuff, but obviously she's also BBG that also already has the power of 2.5 matriarchs inside of her. The players kind of got the soul shard of one of the other matriarchs already. They have a soul shard, which basically just means that they have parts of the soul. She hasn't absorbed the soul fully yet.
Okay.
And yeah, if she absorbs this 3rd matriarch, she has 3.5 souls and would be able to to control the elements of fire, air, and earth, and water only to a certain degree, because she still needs her water, the water soul. So, and also she has some elemental forms, more or less. She has elemental phases. The fight is going to be heavily focused on elementals, because these 4 snake cultures basically were revolving around the elements.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm going to deal with, but she's also a druid, so she also deals with animals. She's also ruler for these snake people, so she should also have some kind of minions with her. And that's are the 3 things I kind of want to do, and we will see how that goes.
I believe in you that this will go great, because you're doing an amazing job. Every time I play with you, it's amazing.
I can only throw that back. So let's throw the question bag itself. Niels, do you have any TTRPG things this week or next week planned, prepared?
Yes, I had.
What is going on?
I had 2 awesome sessions that I DM'd, and both were pretty roleplay lore heavy, where I dropped some lore onto my players, but in the right way, as we discussed in another episode. And yeah, they now are one of the groups where they are all kind of wizards or sorcerers, very magic heavy. They now are below an ancient temple and found an forgotten and sunken into the sand city of before the apocalyptic war between the dragon race and the gods and humanoids on each side. But this city was never found. It was speculated that it was somewhere around the area, but they found it now. And this is where we cut the session off, but they are now standing at the entrance to this enormous underground cavern that just opens up into this ancient city with dragon markings, the respectable color themes to the dragon rulers or to the respective dragon ruler of the city. And there they will find the first champion of fate that they will have to fight. That will hopefully lead them on the way to the other fate champions, and then sooner or later to the 4 fate gods themselves. Because they are now interfering with people's lives and their fates and weaving different weird shit into it to get some recognition back, because they were some gods before the war, but were worshipped in secret because dragons don't want anyone to worship anything else, at least in my world that is. And yeah, but now they want some power back and try to meddle in the humanoid affairs in my world to gain some recognition back. But they have a little bit of limited power because they are not that worshipped anymore.
So you also type power to worship for gods or for other planar beings, that they get more powerful the more people believe that they are there, that the more people believe that they have power.
Exactly.
Nice. I like that a lot as a trope, as used as a mechanic for your games. It's just kind of cool because it opens up very fun ways to deal with, I don't know, gods as enemies, right? Because you could just make sure that all their followers just stop believing in them.
Yeah, that's exactly why I like this trope as well, because it just, as you said, opens up so many options that you can do.
And it also kind of ties back to for me, for PCs that believe in gods for their character. For example, a paladin or a cleric. Yeah. When you play those, they have connection to a god or something. That is one interesting thing because their belief is strong. Probably the god's belief in you should also be strong because the god knows that belief is giving them power, so they should give you power back.
Exactly.
And that kind of this exchange of believing and power, and that is kind of cool. That is really cool.
Yeah, it's a kind of situation of mutual benefit, kind of. So yeah. And the other one was more of a traveling and RP session, so there isn't that much to talk about. But now they are in the Underdark, where they suspect that there is a vampire family living that attacked one of the cities, or the city that they were living in, or at least one of them was. So yeah. That was basically my TTRPG week, and yeah, I can't wait to see where my players are taking all of this.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about it. I mean, the Underdark is also a very cool place to have a campaign or to have a session, right? I love it as a location, right? Underground, these huge, basically the second world. Everything is kind of warped and changed from reality. Everything is different, and I mean that is a cool premise to play.
And one of my players in that campaign comes from the Underdark. They lived there once.
Nice.
So they have kind of the home turf advantage, but not really, because I'm going to twist it into weird things. Yeah, completely throwing a curveball at them. So yeah, but that's my TTRPG week.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, we could talk a little bit longer, but this episode is already going to be a long one. So I think we should just skip ahead, go to the mid-roll, and then go to the actual episode of today, which is villains. Hey everyone, and welcome to the mid-roll of the show. If you are enjoying the show and content, why not subscribe or follow the show right now on whichever platform you are listening on, so you can stay up to date with all episode releases. Then, next you can search us up on social media at DoubleDM Pod, or click the links in the info box of this episode to find our social media channels and follow us there if you want to stay up to date with all scheduling information and episode announcements. If you follow us on Twitter, you will also get a plethora of social media posts, as I spend way too much time on that platform. But hey, I have funny conversations with people like you and post memes, so that's a great thing. And lastly, if you want to help the show out even further, rate and review us on your platform. A quick 5-star rating or a few sentence review really gives us the feedback we need to improve the show and help other people find our show too. And hey, you can also just tell a friend about the fun you had learning with us and get them to listen in too. Also, we want to say that our show has open advertisement slots for you to book. Just head on over to our Twitter or email address doubledmpod@gmail.com to get into contact with us about getting your content shown on our show. Thank you for listening to this mid-roll, and now back to the show.
And with that, welcome back to the episode about boss fights. Let's get right into it. What are they, Emil? Tell me, what do we mean when we say boss fights?
So everyone that has played a video game that somewhat has a fighting mechanic or something has probably had a boss fight in their life. But obviously they're not also just in video games. Basically, boss fights for TTRPGs are just fights with people that have been pulling the strings, that are kind of special in a way, right? They're supposed to be special. People that the characters might have encountered more often. Right? But not necessarily always talking about the big bad of a whole campaign, but also the big bad's general could be boss fights. Right? Everything that is a fight that is not just the players having a fight. I would even go as far and say every fight that is supposed to have a big impact on your campaign is a boss fight.
Yeah.
Every fight that is clearly, hey, this fight is gonna change something. This is it, right? When there's this feeling of this is it, that's a boss fight. And that can be obviously when the campaign ends, because that has the biggest impact on the campaign. The campaign is over. Or it is one of these fights that has some impact on the players, the world, and the villain of this campaign, right?
Yeah.
You're killing the general. Suddenly, the army is left scattering and the BBEG now has to do everything himself. But that is still a boss fight, even though it isn't the ending of a campaign.
Exactly. For me, I would say it is a fight that progresses the story in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would say nearly every fight progresses the story in any way, shape, or form, because most fights aren't random, right?
Yeah.
Right? You're also fighting smaller minions of this general, but I wouldn't call those minions necessarily a boss fight, because they don't have the feeling of this is kind of the end, right? The boss fight is supposed to be an ending to something.
Yeah, true. That progress major plot points. Could you say that, maybe?
Yeah, it's not even about progressing for me. It's about conclusion to those plot points. That's a difference, right? You're ending that plot point. For example, this BBEG that wants to, I don't know, summon a demon lord, whatever, right? Simple things. He has a general that is currently raising hell in one of the countries, because for this demon ritual they need a lot of sorrow and despair around the world. And this general has a mercenary army that is wreaking havoc on a country.
Yeah.
And the players get to that general and defeat that general, and then no parts of the larger plot, because they beat the general, right? Yeah, they're progressing their plot point of the actual BBEG, but I think way more important is that they finished the plot point of the country they are in having been attacked, right? Or being attacked, right? Because the general is not dead. The mercenaries know they're not getting paid anymore. They're gonna flee. They're gonna go. They're not gonna fight anymore. They aren't supposed to be paid anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's way more important than there's another plot point progressing, because obviously the ending fight with your BBEG is also, when there is a boss fight, it's also a boss fight, and there's nothing to be progressed anymore. So I think it's way more important to think about these things and plot points. These things are endings to parts or the story itself.
You could say they are kind of, most of the time, a story arc ending is most of the time somewhere in a boss fight in any capacity.
Yeah,
either
right.
the general, the BBEG itself, or whatever.
Yeah, it's an ending, it's a conclusion to something. Obviously, to say it like that, you can have conclusion without a fight, right? It's not to say that you always have to fight, because even though we're playing D&D, and again, I am of the conviction that D&D is a combat system, that doesn't mean that you can't tell the stories you want to tell in it. There's a difference between D&D is a combat system and D&D isn't designed to tell stories. There's a complete difference in that, and I think people take often offense at D&D is a combat system, while it's just the rules, guys. It doesn't mean that you cannot add your story on top of that. It's just that D&D doesn't have rules for storytelling, because D&D has the design notion of we do not need rules for storytelling. The people will do it themselves, which either you like that or you don't, but this is how it is, and accept that. It's not a problem that D&D is a combat system, but that also means that often things get pushed to combat.
Yeah.
Often things end in fights. Confrontations end in fights, because it's the major way the players can engage with the game. When they look at the character sheet, how much of that is not for combat?
Yeah. Not really. Not much.
Of course, an ideal section isn't for combat.
Yeah, maybe the skills section.
And the free charisma, right?
The mental stats.
The mental stats, they're also for combat. But I'm not talking about persuasion and deception. Generally, right? It doesn't matter, because it's okay that these things end in fights if that's what you want.
Exactly.
D&D isn't the best pacifist system, I will say that. Doesn't mean that you can't play a pacifist campaign in that. Do it if you want, but I wouldn't do it myself. But that's, hey, if you want to do that, then do that. I won't mind. D&D has a lot of combat in it, and that's why a lot of things end in fights, which, if you want that, is great, because I think even though D&D's combat might not be the most interesting I've ever seen or the most enticing, it's still simple, straightforward, and still kind of rewarding to me and my players. And then it comes to fights. And that's what we're here to talk about today, right? D&D will kind of entice you to go into those fights, because you're still the heroes. You're supposed to fight the bad guy. So yeah, boss fights. Niels, I want to ask you again, why are they so important, right? They close off a story point. They kind of end a story point, and sometimes also progress points. But are there any other reasons why they are really important?
Yeah, they don't just close plot points. They give the players themselves closure. As a reward that we talked about in another episode about rewards, and closure is a big part of that. And also it gives players a lot of information, or could give the players a lot of information during the fight. It's just fun to do if your group is into that. And
I mean, they're just rewarding fights, right? Not every fight has a big loot reward attached to it.
Doesn't need to have a big loot reward to that to feel satisfying or rewarding. Not
every fight is rewarding, but boss fights are, because that's how they're designed to be. That's what I mean, right? They're always rewarding. Oftentimes they also have loot, because let's face it, while yes, closure is a big reward, players also want loot. If that general we're talking about with his army has a big bloodthirsty super sword, the fighter in your group will maybe want that sword.
Most definitely.
Right?
I have never met a fighter that didn't want a new sword. So
obviously there's gonna be rewards, and I think that's actually one of the things that you kind of should do for boss battles as well. Think about rewarding your players after them, because if they beat the boss, they should be rewarded. Because normally a boss battle should feel like it's hard to win. It wasn't set in stone who's gonna win at the beginning. It happened through player roles, player ingenuity, and clever use of abilities, player roles, and just players working together, that they beat the boss. And if they do that, right, those are things that your players should be rewarded for. Because some other fights against few bandits, maybe they were hard at that time your players fought them, but they were not memorable. Your players are not going to talk about those bandits 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
But shouldn't necessarily be objective that your players talk about this boss fight 6 weeks later, but it's a good indicator that your boss fight was good if your players talk about it 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
And that can happen, for example, through your rewards. That can happen because your players got cool magic items. Your players got cool information. Your players got closure to your story, right? Those are all things that your players want, and you give it to them because you reward them for their great, role play in the fight, their great ingenuity in using their abilities, their clutch moments where they rolled really, really well. Because even, yes, D&D is a system based on a dice, like every TTRPG or most TTRPGs. There are some that don't use dice, but D&D is based on a dice. If the dice roll well for your players, that is something you can reward them for.
Yeah.
Because even though it's out of the game, it's just a random number from a rock that rolls. It is still something that in game kind of means this character is on a roll. This character is doing good right now.
Yeah, and a piece of plastic can decide between life and death in
this game, right? And that's why even if it's just your players rolling well, you should still reward them for it, right? If they win the boss fight quicker than you expected, do not go around diminishing the loot they get just because the boss fight wasn't that memorable itself. Because, hey, it was memorable because your players rolled so fucking well.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things is when I recently had a long session that was kind of the ending to parts of our campaign, which was the big ending of story parts and the big culmination of a lot of things. And we had more or less several boss fights in that session. One against the dragon and one against the BBEG up to that point. So first of all, the dragon fight was rewarding not because we got loot from it. We got what we wanted. We had an objective, collect this purple flame, and this dragon wanted the flame from us. So we had to keep the flame away from him, right? But also it was this, but the dragon came and attacked us, wanting the flame for himself, or for his group rather. And yeah, we fought the dragon, and the reward was that we obviously won and got the flame for ourselves. What also was great was how the dice fell in that fight, because we weren't hit by the dragon. The dragon rolled shit, and we all rolled way too well for our own good. So that is where that memorability came in. That is where that reward kind of came in. The dice rolls were important in that fight. That fight would have gone completely different if the dice would have felt a different way. And that is part of the game.
And I mean, what adventurer can go around boasting that they fought a dragon without getting hit by the fucking thing?
Yeah, but right, the thing is just, hey, the dice fell. The dice have a say in this matter. And it's important to think about chance is gonna play a part in your game. And also in your boss fight. And in your boss fight, I think it should also be, if the dice fall badly for the players, it shouldn't necessarily be an insta-death for them, but it should make them feel like, oh shit, we need better rolls, or we need to not trust our rolls anymore.
Yeah.
Right? The dice should have a say in your boss fight. Your boss fight shouldn't be devoid of the chance the game implements, right? And that can be just through the simple attacks your players do. But normally, if you put your players up against bandits, you expect them to win, right? You build that encounter with the expectation your players are gonna win. Boss fights don't necessarily have to be built with the expectations my players are definitely gonna win this fight, no matter what happens. If the fight goes badly, my players might lose. My players can lose. Or their players will lose if the fight goes very badly, or they don't do the specific thing they know they should do, right? Your players got the information. This boss cannot be hit with non-magical weapons, and your players go in with only non-magical weapons. This fight goes bad for them.
Yeah.
And that's how boss fights are kind of built for me. I don't want my players to lose necessarily. I still want them to win, but the fight is designed to be not a win regardless of what happens, right? If my players roll badly against the bandits, they might still die, but at the end, they're probably gonna win.
Yeah, the outcome shouldn't be set in stone beforehand.
Right? The outcome shouldn't be set in stone, but it also isn't for the bandit fight set in stone. It's just that it's expected to be that my players win.
Yeah.
Because it's just these simple bandits on the roadside. But this BBEG, a single roll can decide the whole fight, basically, is my point.
Yeah, and if you build a boss battle encounter where you expect your players to win, and build it exactly that way, that can take away from the fun, at least for me. Because if you're completely steamrolling the big bad just because it isn't designed properly, in quotation marks, doesn't feel that rewarding.
Yeah.
But if you're struggling or in a random fight on a roadside, I don't give a shit if we steamroll that. That doesn't matter. But in a boss fight, it should have some significant meaning of whatever things we do might end up in different things than we planned for, just because things happened that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And this just creates a lot more enticing story or a lot more enticing thing in general, just not knowing the outcome because it is just a boss battle. You don't know the outcome yet.
I think it speaks to that. I think choices are important in boss fights, right? If you're in a bandit fight and your paladin chooses to not smite on this round, it's not gonna matter that much, that choice. But in a boss fight, if he decides to not smite this round, which would have, I don't know, doesn't matter, let's just say it would have stunned this bad guy. It wouldn't have because it's smite, but regardless, right? We just say the paladin chooses to not stun your target, not stun the boss. And the boss is gonna make the paladin pay for that by one-shotting the artificer or whatever, right? That choice the paladin made has a clear impact. He decided to not use his spell slot to do that this round, which just means the boss is gonna take use of that. They are gonna use the fact that they now have this round where they're not stunned to show them that that was a mistake, right? The choices should be important. The choices should be felt. And that's really this point what makes them, on one hand, memorable, but what makes them more important, actually. The choices of your players in the battle, every single one of them matters because every single one of them is the decision between life and death, between win and defeat. So, Niels, we talked a lot about importantness and what they are. We need to talk about how to make them memorable. What makes boss fights memorable? Because that is what most people are looking for in boss fights, right? This fight your players talk about for 6 weeks straight after. How do you get to that point?
There are multiple ways, and especially in D&D, as we talked about earlier, there are some rules, especially just for boss battles, and that would be legendary actions.
Yeah,
because a bandit on a roadside doesn't have legendary actions, and why should he? But your big bad or the general of that should have those legendary actions, just to make the character or the enemy way more interesting, because he can do stuff others can't.
Right, legendary actions are part of the D&D rules. What I'm saying is not actually true, but it's breaking the rules, because the first time every D&D player encounters legendary actions, they're gonna be like, what the fuck, they can do that? Right? They're not gonna expect that because no one ever did it before them. They are not allowed to do this. But this boss is basically, oh, your turn is over. Well, now I'm gonna fucking hit you for that. And the players look at you, no, it's my turn. No, it's this boss's turn. His legendary action is up. And that is such a beautiful thing to do, right? It's kind of cheating your players for the first instance until they actually learn what it means, what a legendary action is, right? But they kind of feel cheated. And I think that is actually very interesting for bosses, because they're supposed to make the players feel cheated, kind of. Right? Not saying that you should always do this, but if a boss does something the players did not expect and does the unexpected, it makes your players go, wow, this is a number above the fights we had before. Because this boss is breaking the rules of the game, we know.
Yeah, and another thing that D&D gives you that exactly does the same thing, but kind of different, but still the same impact, lair actions for your big bad or for your enemies. Because now, not just the enemy, the character, the monster itself is against you, but the environment, the lair around it as well. Now suddenly, even the fucking cave wants to murder you. That wasn't there before, and this just shocks the players. Wait. Okay, I got now legendary actions, all good. The big bad has a turn after my turn for some reason. Okay, but why the fuck does the wall want to kill me now?
Yeah, right. In this boss fight, this, I don't know, necromancer in his crypt or something, suddenly hands come out of the wall and start dragging people to the walls and pinning them to the walls or something, right?
Exactly.
Like this, and the players go, what the fuck is happening? What? Since when can that do that? And right, that is the thing. It's these two things that D&D gives you that change up boss fight dynamics completely, because they are not part of every fight. They're not supposed to be used in every single fight. But in those fights that they are used in, they can add so much on top of that, right? Evie from D&D Disaster Story also suggested that on Twitter when I made a thread about boss battles and how to make them memorable, that using layer actions is very important, especially also if they sometimes might be even also against the BBEG, kind of environmental effects, right?
Yeah.
That have to deal with both, that change the dynamic of the combat, especially, right? That makes your players go, okay, now we're fighting in a volcano. There's erupting lava everywhere. The BBEG is also gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But it's this complete change up of the dynamic of this combat, because suddenly your players cannot just rush up and hit like they did in the fields before they were in the volcano. And one of the things about this environment is they can figure it out. I would say if you have interesting environments that have detrimental or beneficial effects to both sides, make them gameable. Make them things your players or your BBEG can figure out. Obviously, you need to be that much conscious of, you know, the answer to the gameable thing, but your BBEG might not. They might need time to figure it out. They will figure it out eventually, maybe, but they need time for that. Maybe 2 rounds or 3 rounds. And that is when the BBEG knows how to control, or not control, but use the lava flow to their advantage. If the players do not figure that out beforehand, that's gonna change the dynamic of the combat again, hardly. Where this BBEG knows, I know exactly where this lava is coming, I'm gonna dodge it and make sure that the players do not, because I drag them more or less to the point where the lava is coming next. That is gonna be an epic moment for your players when they suddenly realize the BBEG has figured out this detrimental effect to both of us. Now we need to do it as well. We need to figure this out because this is going to be the end of us.
Yeah, it just adds so much oomph to the whole situation. When the players realize exactly that. It's just, I love it.
It's one of the things Sasha, boy with girl's name, on Twitter also said, right? Interesting environments. Things, it's not necessarily the boss fight itself, but the surroundings of that boss fight. Like we talked about in the last episode about environments, right? Make your environments felt. Even if it's not in mechanical sense. But if you are fighting, I don't know, one of the coolest boss fights I've ever was part in was where we were just falling off an infinite tower, more or less.
Okay.
I mean, how fucking cool is that?
That's awesome.
Right? It had a mechanical impact of how do you move while you're falling, but also it had an impact of just the GM taking a few seconds every turn to describe how we're just falling past this infinite tower, right? The dark bricks, the black bricks, and sometimes a window whooshes by while we're falling so fast, right? That is an interesting environment to fight in. Not because necessarily it's mechanical, but also just because it's so fucking cool to fight while falling.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that kind of relates to layer actions a bit is regional effects. Those are some things in D&D as well that don't have a major component in the boss battle itself, but into for the build-up beforehand.
Yeah.
It just builds the anticipation when, for example, around a red dragon's lair, the whole earth is scorched. All of these minor details, or not even minor details, just build up the anticipation of what the hell is then if this is bad as well already, what the fuck is going on there? And it just keeps the tension. It just builds the tension way more. Environment is a huge thing.
Environment is a huge thing. I think especially what you said there, build-up is important, right? BBEGs influence the players, right? We talked about that in our villains episode, that there should be an influence. There should both sides influencing each other, the players faulting plans and the BBEG kind of trying to set them, trying to kill them or whatever, right? But they are interacting with each other. And that interaction is build-up. That is tension. And that should be there, right? The players with this, I don't know, mercenary general, right? For this whatever BBEG. They are gonna send stronger and stronger enemies to your players. The woods around their base camp where they are sending the mercenaries from are kind of dead. They are hunted down, right? These mercenaries do not fucking care about the woods they are in. They destroy it. You see burned landmarks. You see destroyed shrines. You see old destroyed temples or whatever that have been destroyed by this mercenary camp because they do not fucking care. They want the bricks from this temple. They want to have this open field for whatever reason. They want to, right? They need the animals to feed themselves. So they hunt them down and hunt them basically dry. They hunt this forest dead. That environment and that build-up that comes with that is so important, right? And your players are gonna feel that. And if you do that right, if you build the tension right, it's all gonna culminate in this boss fight. And that boss fight is gonna, just because of this build-up and tension, already gonna be that much more memorable than if you would have not have that. That again, like as we said in the environment episode, it's the first layer. It's the first layer of the scene you have. And the build up to that scene you have is part of that.
Exactly.
It's what happened before. They're not gonna forget the burned village by these mercenaries. They're not gonna forget that. They're gonna swear revenge, especially if it's connected to a player. If the player is from there and their village was burnt down, right? Connecting things to your players is one of the best way to make things more memorable.
Yeah, and I think your big bad in that boss fight should also be connected or connect to the players, not just for story reasons, but in game during the fight as well. Have the big bad interact with your characters.
Yeah.
Have them toy with them, toss them around, talk to them. Talking is such a huge point in boss battles that is often overlooked, in my opinion, because it can just have that many implications and just fuel the fire of rage, for example, for other players that might, if the wizard is super enraged because the villain just taunts them into oblivion, he might not be as clear-headed as before, but the barbarian might be even better or whatever. Just having the interaction between the big bad and the characters themselves makes the battle way more memorable, because not every bandit will interact the same way as the fucking big bad does, or the villain of that boss battle.
That's definitely true. That's what Madame DM on Twitter said, toying with your players. For example, when they were running Curse of Strahd, as they said on Twitter, they made sure that Strahd addressed every PC by name. That alone can be a lot. Taunting your players, right? Enraging them. But it doesn't have to be enraging them. It's just making them feel something. Be it rage, be it questioning themselves, right? If you ever get to the point where you can make your players question if they are in the right here, if the BBEG might be the one that is in the right here, you've already done enough to make this boss fight memorable. You do not need a fucking boss fight anymore. The boss fight can literally be the most useless fight you ever had. But if your players are going, fuck, are we the bad guys, or are we working for the bad guys, or are we doing the right thing, is all that you need for your players to go, shit.
Just thinking about this situation just gave me goosebumps.
And one of the things, for example, in one of the boss fights I had in one of my last campaigns that has finished now, was the ending fight where they were on the Fields of Judgment, basically all gods at this point, fighting another god. And then they realized, basically, they were heroes. And this god they were fighting, he had the right reasons, but had the wrong means. He knew when he wins, when he has all the godly power of fate, he can just turn back time and make sure that everything he did never happens. So all of his murders are never happen. He has never killed a single person, right? He turns back time. He makes sure that no one does something. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to save everybody. But he just does it in the wrong way, because he goes around killing, murdering, and torturing people for what he wants. And the players do not like that. And right, that is the thing. But they realized that their actual enemy was the person that sent them on this quest in the first place. Because they were like, collect these fate stones for me, or collect the fate stones. You have this enemy, he wants to collect all 11 to destroy fate, which was completely true. He wants to destroy fate to make sure that everything he did never happens. He wants to destroy his fate so that his fate is never gonna be, I have to kill all these people. Yeah. And then my players realized that the actual enemy is the one that that employed them to collect all these fate stones, because they want the fate stones to make sure to control fate themselves. Yeah. But they had even worse reasons for why they wanted to control fate. One of them was just basically wrong in how they were acquiring these stones. But they wanted to do the right thing and make sure that no one has to die, that no one has to be controlled by this person. The other person wanted to control everything, everywhere, and everyone. That's where my players went, after a few rounds of combat, went, shit, fuck.
Yeah, wait.
Fucking shit, what, no, you cannot do this to us.
Help.
And this ended with them still with them winning the fight against the actual BBEG of the campaign. And then this anti-hero, I call it, I say he's an anti-hero because he wants to do the right thing, but he just doesn't do it the right way. Exactly. And they said, we're gonna kill you. We're gonna make sure that you do not control fate. But okay, we're gonna grant you this. We're gonna destroy fate. We're gonna make sure that everything you did never happens, but you're also not gonna go past that, right? Because then they killed him, took the fate stones from him, acquired all 11 fate stones, and that made them be able to change fate to however they wanted to. And that was the thing, right? They said, no, we do not want you to do the things with us, even though we know you want to do the same thing as us. You're gonna die, you're not gonna control fate, but we're gonna make sure that your part stays how you wanted it to. Right? They gave him his redemption more or less, but they made sure that he didn't do it himself, right? They gave him what he wanted, but they made sure that he was still punished for what he did. Yeah. And he was fine with that. that. But that's how I made that boss fight memorable, because first of all, my players were betrayed. Second of all, I made them question themselves. And third of all, it ended with cool boss fight things. But yeah, those were the ingredients to that. So yeah, I totally fucking agree that toying with your players, taunting them, making them question themselves or whatever is majorly important. Have the villain interact with them aside from combat is a great way to make it memorable.
And one thing I like to use to make my boss fights more memorable is just steal from video games and build boss stages or different phases to the whole thing, because it just breaks up the pace. It keeps your players on your toes. It just forces your players to think differently every couple of rounds, because something is constantly changing.
Yeah.
That was said by Joshua Peters on our Chase the Ghost on Twitter, on the thread that you made. And I completely agree. It's just an amazing tool that you can use to make it more memorable, because it's just another way to break up the game, basically, to make it more unique in a certain way, because no other enemy has the exact same phases, or even one of the phases is completely unique to every other enemy, and then you maybe have 3 of them in the same battle. Yeah,
I mean, JP said on Twitter, right, the thing about he didn't think that would actually be a good thing in D&D beforehand, but then his GM did that, and he was, wow, okay, that is fucking cool. And right, it's just the same as in video games. If you're playing a Dark Souls game or a Souls-like game, right, and the boss you had so much time to beat, you finally beat them. Oh, phase 2. Fucking hell, I need to learn a whole fucking new pattern of attacks. But it's, as you said, it's gonna change the dynamic. It's gonna make your players feel like everything new is happening around them. It's basically a second boss fight on top of that.
Yeah.
And that should come with a lot of changes. Not just to the attack patterns or to the abilities this BBEG has, but also to the way they interact with the party, for example. It should change the environment, right? The first environment is fought atop of the tower, and then the tower is sundered and everyone falls and is now falling from this infinite tower. And that is the second stage. If your first stage was on the top of the tower, and now everyone falls, who wins before you splash onto the ground?
Yeah, and your players might think when you start to fall off the tower that it's over, but then there's one other thing that video games do, and Klaus from H on Twitter, the thing that every Dark Souls player knows, wait, why do I still hear boss music? And exactly that, incorporate ambience music or sounds in general into your boss battles, because that connects more than just one sense to the same thing. It just, if you have a specific song or a specific sound or whatever for your specific boss, it just connects them exactly to that and makes it more memorable because of that sound and because of the connection between those two.
Yeah, I think that the adding of any kind of ambience to entice the boss player, right? It's not for the player characters, but it's for the players, right? We're here to play a game as people. The players want this boss music. Let's face it. Players want to have music. Makes people, like we said in our music episode 9 with Eli, music is a great way to entice immersion, because it adds that layer of because music is your ears are connected to your brain. Your ears are gonna signal your brain that the music you're hearing is scary. You're supposed to feel scary now, and all of a sudden you're more scared, right? It's still a game. You're not scared actually, but the boss fight is still gonna make you feel differently than when you're walking through town.
Yeah,
and the music does that. It's gonna add to that. You don't have to use it, but there's other things. For example, one of the things that's kind of more fun actually for me is I have a Philips Hue light bulb over my table.
Oh yeah.
I can just press a button on my phone and suddenly the light goes red in the room we're in. Right? That's one of the things. Do that if you want. It's gonna add a lot outside the battle.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun. If you're that type of person that enjoys that outside the game, do that, because it's gonna add that extra level of immersion to your players, and they suddenly realize the light goes red, the music goes louder, and it's gonna be a lot more faster. It's scary, and your players are gonna be, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck.
Yeah, and one thing that, once you mentioned the Philips Hue thing, I have that as well in my room. And there is this thing that you can link it with the sound that is coming from your boxes. And then the light flickers is exactly in the way the music is playing right now. And this combination just, it can just completely change the vibe from, we're just walking through a forest, blah, 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 to, oh shit, oh fuck, if we don't end this right here, right now, we are gonna die. The whole world is gonna end. And yeah.
One other thing that was brought up by someone on Twitter, Peanut Butter Friend or friend_butter on Twitter said something to make the boss unique. Anything really. Be it an ability, be it a character trait, be it their looks, be it how they fight, whatever, right? Something to make them unique. Something that makes them stand out. That could be their legendary actions. That could be the way they talk to the players. That could be the way they choose to engage with the environment. That everything, right? Just saying this, no, again, make your villains unique. Because if they're unique, they're gonna be a lot more memorable than Bandit number 5 on the roadside.
Yeah, can be hard to make them unique at some point, but
yeah,
we made a video on that, or a video episode on that. So if you want to learn how to make on
villains and how to make villains interesting, right? Listen to that. That is very close connected to this episode, obviously. But there we talked about making them unique and how to do that and what you need to do to make them whole, more or less. I also think that they should be completed. They shouldn't feel like just a template. They should feel like a complete person in this world, influenced by it, influencing the things around them.
Yeah, and one thing that I like to do is to tell a story that it is not just, we need to kill that enemy in this boss battle, but tell a whole different story, kind of connected, but still just concentrated on that fight with the fight itself. Because a battle can be a huge storytelling device, and I think it should be used as such. That is kind of linked to make the villains unique and make them feel whole, because a complete villain would act in specific ways and use exactly those ways to tell the story through the combat.
Yeah.
To make it more memorable, because using the mindset of that villain that you fought for I don't know how many sessions, years, whatever, just brings it all together and connects it to it just dislocates we are just HP bars fighting against another HP bar.
Yeah.
Just persons fighting each other. And this has huge story implications and huge memorability factors.
Oh, for sure, right? I think, tying everything that happened up to that point into the final battle is very important as well, right? Making sure that, for example, if your players, one of the things that I always remember when I say that is Critical Role's Chroma Conclave arc, the fight against Thordek the Cinder King, where Liam O'Brien has the Dragon Slayer sword, I think it was, and is ripping it more or less across Thordek, right? The how do you want to do this against Thordek? Where he goes, I don't know what he exactly said, but Thordek killed his mother. And that needed to be felt, and Liam made it felt. Liam made sure that Vex put the whole rage he had his whole life for his mother's death into that strike, into that slash against Thordek. And that is important. Thordek was very big for the twins, for the twin half-elves in Critical Role as a villain. And that was felt by how they fought him, right? That is the culmination of everything. The villain influenced a lot about this campaign. Thordek was part of this game. Thordek was part of the history, and the players felt that in the combat. It was made sure by everyone at the table that is felt. The villain wasn't just thrown in there because Matt Mercer needs a villain. Thordek was there with a reason. Thordek had his reasons before, and those reasons influenced the players in some ways. And that just was so brilliantly done for me that you could really feel that there was a connection between Vex and Thordek, but that there was weight behind everything in this combat because of what happened before. And as a GM, you do not necessarily have to make sure that happens, but you should pay attention to it. You should look at the weight of the actions of both sides had on each other for this combat. If the players foiled a plan of this BBG that was important, the BBG is gonna be angry about it. If the BBEG killed the parents of one of the players, or one of the player characters, the player's gonna be angry about it. There's gonna be emotion, there's gonna be high stakes, there's gonna be maybe rage, there's gonna be just this culmination of the weight of everything that led up to this moment. And this lead up, this build up, as we talked about, happens also in a story, not just in the environment, but it happens everywhere. And that tension, again, that needs to be brought to a high point in the boss battle.
Yeah, and one thing that you can do to even further that tension is if you have this connection between the villain in this boss battle and one of the characters have other things going on regarding that connection. If, for example, the big bad killed one of the parents of the player character, and they are fighting somewhere in the area where the other parent still lives, put a timer on that fight. If you don't finish that in the right amount of time, there's gonna be consequences that regard to the thing that made you connect with the villain.
For example, I think adding timers in general is a great way to make it fun. Not just to change the dynamic, but also to make your players sweat for it. They know they need to kill this BBEG in the next 3 rounds, or they're gonna have full HP again, or whatever, right? That's gonna make your players sweat. That's gonna make your players use everything they have to make the best thing possible. They're gonna talk about that. They're gonna be like, oh, remember that fight where we were sweating our asses off on the edge of our seats and like, we need to win this fight. We need to win this fight. We need to win this fight. Boom.
Yeah. And I think
you're gonna add a lot of pressure to your players.
Yeah, and I think the closer the players get to that timer or to the end of the timer, the more memorable it becomes, because it's just by a thread, just so close it could have failed that easily. Just one thing goes the other way and the whole thing is just useless.
Yeah.
So that just it's again this oomph to the situation.
Yeah. I think going hand in hand with the timers, however, is, and same as this oomph, that feeling also comes with objectives around the boss fight, right? I don't know, there are 3 pillars that are powering this orb of destruction this BBEG is protecting from the players. Players do not need to destroy the orb of destruction. They need to destroy the 3 pillars powering it. And now, how do your players do that? They do not need to kill the villain. They could kill the villain first and then destroy the pillars. But maybe it's smarter to destroy the pillars first, make sure that the BBEG's plan fails regardless of what the players are doing next, or if the players die after that, but the BBEG's plan is foiled at first. And then they could also come into clutch with, now the BBEG is powering the orb itself, using a lot of his own power, making himself weaker so the players can actually fight him or whatever, right? But there's an objective there. The players have something to do besides just killing. And that is gonna make them go, okay, that is fucking cool, because their ingenuity is asked of them, right? How do you do that, right? Everyone knows how they can hit a BBG with their magic sword or their magic spell. But now, how do we destroy these ominous obelisks the BBG is protecting while we are fighting the BBG? But our actual objective is destroying these obelisks, right? How do they do that? That question is gonna linger with players for a long time, because they're gonna have ideas, and those ideas are most often more cool than hitting the BBEG.
Yeah, because again, this kind of relates to the environment thing. Working with everything you got, everything that is going on around, just is so much more fun and so much more memorable than just standing there and hitting the big bad over and over again. That gets boring really quick, especially for that type of situation where the stakes are that high.
Yeah, that was suggested by Jackson Wagner on Twitter, which I really, really loved as an advice to not go for killing, because, right, I love my combats messy, dynamic, and having objectives that are not killing are very great for me, especially also in boss fights, because they just want to spice it up really quick, because now it also becomes a resource thing. Which resources are they going to use on the objective and not on the BBG?
Yeah.
Right? If your spellcaster is using a 9th level spell slot for this objective, they're not going to have that in the fight against the BBG, which could mean that BBG can cast a spell, the wizard or bard or whatever cannot counter spell now at 9th level anymore, or they do not have their power word kill anymore or whatever, right? But that's just the thing. It's now it becomes also kind of a resource match. Which resources do your players use? Which choices are they gonna make? And those choices are gonna impact the outcome of the battle. And that's again hammering this home. Choices are so important in boss battles, and they should always feel important. Everyone should feel like their choices have mattered in this combat.
Yeah, and I think you said something about big combats, and what that can do is just adding more than one enemy. Have the villain have minions that fight for them. Tyler said that on Twitter, I think. Yeah.
Tyler's trying at Casual YT. Maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's Real Light. It could be both.
Yeah, but adding these minions, they don't have to be completely overpowered or strong or whatever. Just adding things to the fight to make it a bigger thing in general.
Yeah,
it's
more
just
things the players have to pay attention to.
Exactly. It's just now this huge blob of storytelling goodness with all that is going on, just enhanced by the sheer amount of things that can take actions within the combat.
Yeah.
And it just keeps that thing up, the tension.
Yeah. Adding minions really works well because they're just gonna be things that first of all work for the BBEG, second of all might sacrifice themselves again, maybe claim some of the players' resources, or become dangerous if the players do not pay attention to them, right? Everyone who's played MMORPGs knows that you have to pay attention to ads of bosses because they will be dangerous if you do not. They are not necessarily dangerous if you pay attention to them, but they can become dangerous if you let them just do what they want to do.
Exactly.
And maybe these ads are just there to power up the BBEG. Then again, objective, kill the minions first and then the BBEG. But there's so much things you can do with your minions as a BBEG or while preparing the BBEG that I think really adding just a few minions can be very interesting, even if they are templates, right? I don't know, you have this demon summoner or hell summoner as a BBEG, and they have a few imps. And imps are very, 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 very easy to kill.
Yeah.
But if you do not kill them, they're gonna be the thing, they're gonna, I don't know, sneak around and steal your spell scroll all of a sudden because you didn't pay attention to them. Your players are gonna hate these imps after you do that. Just one thing, you just need to do one spell scroll, and they're always gonna pay attention to those imps. And that is also maybe something, but the spell scroll is still might be lost. Maybe the imps are using it against the players suddenly, and the players were like, on a lightning bolt spell scroll, suddenly, I'm hit by light.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fucking cool.
That's amazing. And one imp might not be a problem, but 20 imps might be.
Yeah.
So pay attention to minions, because even if they're weak on their own, mass people. Just mass.
3 million chickens can kill Tiamat. Is what I always say. 3 million chickens can kill Tiamat. I think that's actually the calculation. If you think about, if you pit Tiamat as a stat block against 3 million chickens, the chickens win. Was the calculation or something. 3 million chickens can kill Tiamat. That is all I will say.
I just think 3 million chickens also would just suffocate Tiamat because there's just 3 fucking million chickens.
It's interesting. No, but just remember that the minions still have an importance in the fight, even if they might not be the most combat prowess in the fight. They can still do objectives. Maybe they're doing something for the BBG, right? The BBG is holding back the party, while the minions are activating the machine they are in right now. I don't know, right? They are the minions are manning the meat grinder the BBG wants to throw the players in. One last thing that I wanted to keep for last before we wrap this up today was James Jonas on Twitter said, or Joe Wow on Twitter said, cinematic once per encounter actions. And I never thought about that before in my life. But having something BBEG does that they only do once per fight, that can be change a phase, change up the environment, the battlefield, summon minions, whatever, is very interesting because it's gonna be a memorable moment if your BBEG does the cinematic thing, right? I think the cinematic is a very important thing. It's a cinematic thing the BBEG does. It's cinematic to do this. The players are gonna be like, whoa. I don't know, the druid BBEG slams their fist into the ground and suddenly dark vines come out of the ground and entangle all the players, and they know they need to find their way out before this druid is finished with their ritual. Or whatever. That is a cinematic once per encounter action. They're gonna do that again. They did it once. That is all that matters.
Oh yeah, I have to think about something like this for my.
I never thought about it, but it was such a great suggestion because it's right. You're not gonna use it at the end of the fight. It's a one per fight thing. It's gonna be the big thing. It's gonna be a big change, a big turning point. Either you made the BBG mad enough to use his one-time perfect thing, or they're gonna do it at the beginning as a last resort or whatever. But it's gonna be cinematic regardless because it's an interesting action, right? Make that action the most interesting thing you can think of for this BBEG, right? Whatever it may be, it's gonna change the dynamic of the fight once again. It's gonna make the fight memorable because it's something only this BBEG can do, and they did it once and it changed everything.
Okay, now I have to get my thinking machine going for something like this for the campaign where the players will be facing the fate gods, because I think that fits really well in there. But I don't have a fucking clue on what to do. But yeah, that sounds awesome.
It's all about purpose. It's all about what is BBG here to do, and then you can all tie nearly everything back to what is this BBG supposed to do for me.
Exactly.
So I think we talked long enough about how to make a boss battle memorable. We talked about why they're important. We talked about what they are and what we think about them. I think we can wrap this up here, but just to clarify once again, a boss battle should be a big thing in your campaign. It should be a memorable moment. And you can do that in so many different ways. And there are a lot of ways we didn't even talk about today because we don't have the time. Remember that it's all about having fun at the table, obviously, but looking at your players, right? If you're lost for what you're supposed to do to make it memorable, look at your players. Look at their character sheets and think about what would work well with that to make it memorable. If you have a paladin that is very strongly convicted in something, have the BBG taunt them because their conviction is wrong. That's going to be memorable to the paladin because maybe they realize that they are actually wrong.
Yeah.
And then it's going to drag itself through the whole campaign after that because the paladin is always doubting themselves now. Am I even in the right? Connected to the players. That is the last advice I can give for today. And with that, I think, Niels, you can wrap us up for today because we talked long enough about boss battles in TTRPGs.
Okay, and as per usual, you can find us anywhere on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDMPod, and you can also visit our website at www.doubledm.com, and we also have a Ko-Fi if you would like to check that out. And if you like this show, please consider rating us on any podcast listening platform of your choice. And with that, thanks for listening. See you on the next one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.